I was watching a video that James Wolfe, otherwise known as the Angry Video Game Nerd, did for Cinemassacre.com and Spike.com. And I mentioned this briefly in my differences of animation between America and Japan in the storytelling. And what he reviewed and talked about was a show that came out in the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s, and I didn't really know much about it. I mean, I may have seen it possibly on occasions, but I really couldn't remember it. And I'd seen over the years some recent clips here and there, recent pictures, courtesy of a website called shadowink.com or something like that, where they kind of do. Shadowink.com is basically a website that specializes in showing clips of people being transformed into either inanimate objects or animals or whatever. And I sort of, like I said, saw some clips and stuff there, but I still could not get my finger onto where I'd probably seen those before. And then when James did his review, it finally hit me that, oh yeah, I had heard of this series. But the truth is, the reason I couldn't really remember it as well as I would remember Transformers or G.I. Joe or Jim or even My Little Pony was the fact that I'd never was able to see it as much as I probably could as a kid. Because as a kid, growing up in my house, a show like that, even though it was based on a toy line, as graphic and as gory as it was depicted, and as James Wolfe said it was, for a cartoon show back at the time, there was no way my mom would have let me watch something like that. I mean, like I said, I probably had seen it on occasions, but I just couldn't remember. But again, there is a reason for it. The reason being the fact that I think it was just a little too gory, a little too graphic for someone my age at that time. I mean, you're looking at a show that if it had been aired today, or if the TV ratings were out back then, that show would have gotten a TV PG rating right off the bat. TV PG FV, no doubt about it. I mean, Transformers and G.I. Joe and I think even Jem get the TV PG, but on the hub right now, but that probably would have gotten TV PG FV written all over it. The reason being is because, again, it was really very edgy, very graphic, very gory for its time. I mean, nowadays, and even James and a lot of other people have pointed this out. James has pointed this out. People at DeviantArt have pointed this out. At websites have pointed this out. That if you tried to get away with something like that today in a show, there'd be no way you'd be able to get away with something like that. Not really. I mean, you'd have to basically wait until it was late prime time, if you will, to get away with something like that. You would. I mean, think about it, folks. Do you think, honestly, today you could sit at home Saturday morning and watch a show like that without it, people complaining about it? Parents mainly. You couldn't even watch it because they'd probably change it. You see, this is another reason why I never got to watch a show like that back then, because you see, like I said, my parents, most importantly my mom, would not allow me or my sisters to watch something like that. I mean, it was okay for us to watch Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Jem and Ponies, and even He-Man and She-Ra, and Thundercats and Silverhawks. But when it came to a show like that, you'd think, well, it's no big deal. It was still, you think, oh, it's no big deal. But basically what it was is what was depicted in it, and how it was depicted and how it was shown. For example, I mentioned this in my animation differences video that I did recently. One of the characters, on the hero side, on the good guy side, always seemed to fall victim to one of the main villains. You see, the character I'm talking about is Sandra Shore. Now, Sandra Shore, and I mentioned this before in my difference videos, and you could watch clips of this over at theshadowink.com. You can watch clips of this or watch the episodes in which it happens in here on YouTube. Or you can even read about it in the archives or even in a review by badmovieplanet.com. But basically what happens, and even watch it, you can even read about it on a description of a fan art page of her, or fan art work of her on DeviantArt. But basically, this is one of the reasons I never was able to watch this. You see, Sandra, like I said, was one of the good guys, one of the hero characters. She was basically part of the Earth Corps team. And what happened twice was she became the victim of Decomposed. What happened is that in part 3, I'm guessing at the beginning of the later half of part 3, basically the beginning of the second half of part 3 and into the first half of part 4, which basically makes it a whole episode together, a whole 30-minute episode, 22-minute episode. She was turned, for the first time in the series, into a giant shrieking zombie. Now, you would think, okay, that's no big deal. She's just a shrieking zombie. You know, you could easily turn her back. Well, yeah, they did turn her back, but here was the thing about it. She was a shrieking zombie to the point that okay, let me put it to you like this. We've seen zombie films and zombie-related films and B movies, as people call them. And we always know that if somebody turns into a zombie, you know, they're just like, you know, their eyes just sag and all that. But in some cases, when somebody turns into a zombie, like in the case of Inhumanoids, thanks to Decompose, they don't just turn into into that kind of a zombie like that. You know, their eyes are sagging. You know, they turn into a zombie of the undead. Think of Army of Darkness of the Evil Dead series. The main love interest in there got turned into a zombie as well. Now, think of it this way. That's exactly what this is exactly what it was like. Because you see what happened was the fact that when Sandra got turned into a giant shrieking zombie the first time, when they went to go find her and cure her and change her back, her ribs were exposed on one side to the point that she could do exactly what Decompose does. She could open her ribs and put somebody in there. And that's exactly what she does to the leader of the Earth Corps, I guess her love interest, Herc Armstrong. She basically picks him up, opens up her rib cage, puts him in there, and then shuts it. So basically the kind of zombie she's turned into is an undead zombie, which is kind of like skeleton-like. So basically she's a skeleton-like zombie of the undead. And the only way she or anybody else in that predicament could be cured is by sunlight. Basically kind of the weakness of the vampires. But again, this was another reason I was never able to watch it, because of things like that. And then it happened again to Sandra in the episode Primal Passion. It happened to her again. And they faded out to a commercial with her turning into a shrieking zombie by having her zombie face, fade out to black for us, if you will. But anyway, that's exactly what happened. And again, these are some of the reasons I never could watch the series. Series when I was a kid, because if I had watched the series, I probably would have remembered it better than normal. Instead of just wondering, okay, where are these clips from? What show is these clips from? Where are they from? Blah, 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 and stuff like that. I wouldn't have had to worry about that, but the truth is, I couldn't remember because, like I said, I never had a chance to really watch the series. And Inhumanoids wasn't the only series. Like, it wasn't the only series that they kind of cut down on. My mom was very weary of me watching. I mean, like I said, I was able to watch He-Man and She-Ra and Silverhawks and Thundercats and all that. But there were times with He-Man that my mom didn't let me watch it at times when it first came out because of the villain Skeletor. But as time went on, she allowed me to watch it. You see, what I'm saying, folks, is had I known about Inhumanoids back then, I probably would have remembered it better and I probably would have clicked on. But you see, this is why I also believe why Inhumanoids didn't last as long as Transformers and G.I. Joe and Jem and My Little Pony. And it wasn't because of the fact that maybe the toy line wasn't as popular as people would hope. I guarantee you it probably was. Because anything brought out by Hasbro at that time as a toy franchise was, all in all, a huge hit. I mean, anything Hasbro brought out at that time was a huge hit. Whether it be Transformer toys, Gem dolls, G.I. Joe toys, it didn't matter. They brought it out, it became a huge hit. My Little Ponies, you get the idea. So that's why I feel that Inhumanoids probably was a huge hit as well. But again, what I feel really brought Inhumanoids down was exactly what I mentioned. Was the fact that the show was too graphic and too gory for the average children's show even back then. To the point that I think maybe there were some complaints perhaps. And that's why it didn't get another season or two. Like Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Jem did, and even My Little Pony, because they were it was too graphic and too gory. It was too intense at the time. Basically what Inhumanoids was back then would be more appropriate for what is known as Adult Swim right now on Cartoon Network or Funimation Primetime or whatever you want to call it. That would be the only time back then, and even now, you'd probably see something like Inhumanoids. But again, my honest opinion is I believe the reason it didn't last long and the reason people like myself don't remember as well as we'd like to, even if we just saw glimpses and pieces of it, is because of the fact that it didn't last long on television due to probably its graphic and gory nature. I mean, like I said, I'm pretty sure the toy line sold out like nothing. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm pretty sure it sold well. I'm pretty sure anybody that wanted to play the Inhumanoids wanted to play them. And played them, not wanted to play them, but wanted to buy the action figures so they can, do the play outs, if you will, of them. But what I'm saying in my honest opinion is I believe the reason this show did not last as long as a lot of people would hope it would is due to the fact of its graphic, gory nature. Now, you could probably disagree with me on that, and you'll probably say that's probably not the reason. Maybe you're right. But I'm pretty sure, in my honest opinion, that was one of the reasons. I mean, it's one thing to probably see all that graphic and goriness of Inhumanoids on the big screen, if you will, but to see it every Saturday or Sunday morning, especially Sunday morning before going to church, if you will, I think that might be just a little too much. You know what I'm saying? So, my honest opinion about Inhumanoids is, even though I've never really seen it, it sounds like it was a really good cartoon. I might rent the DVDs and see exactly what everybody's talking about. I might just do that. But again, like I said, the reason I couldn't remember as well as I'd like to, the reason I never could really remember it as good as I would remember Transformers or G.I. Joe or Jem or Ponies, is because I never really had a chance to see it. And I think it was mainly due to the fact that the channel, I believe, if I do remember anything, I remember that the channel that most of the Hasbro related shows came on was the two channels that I remember the most were KTVU and KBHK. And I think, if memory serves me correctly, I think perhaps Inhumanoids did come on KBHK. I could be wrong. But I think I may have seen something like that on there before. But again, the reason I never saw it, and people like me, the reason I never saw it, and I'm pretty sure people like myself on that same boat, is due to the fact of its gory, graphic nature, and our parents probably wouldn't let us watch them, especially if it was on before we went to church. So, but overall, I have to say that from what people have talked about, from what James Wolfe said, and I guess you could call this a little bit of a response to his Inhumanoids review, I have to say that it looks very interesting. Probably was, in fact, exactly what he said. Probably a little too gory and graphic at the time. Because, like I said, if I remembered it, I would have remembered it. Because believe me, you can ask my family what shows I remember back growing up watching, and I could list them off right now. I can list them off right in front of them, from Transformers to Chase to He-Man to G.I. Joe to Gem. I mean, the list just goes on. But the only show that I never could list off would be Inhumanoids, because I never really got a chance to see it. And if I did, it was only on a few glimpses and occasions, but I think it was mostly due to the fact that it came on from where I was living as a kid in Hayward. It came on Sunday mornings, I believe. I could be wrong. I can't really remember, but there's something inside me that, there's something trying to break through right now, kind of telling me that was when they were aired, was on Sunday mornings before I went to church with my family. So, and my family, like I said, especially my mom, they probably wouldn't, they never would let me watch a show like that, because of another reason too. My family, most importantly, my mom's very religious, very Christianized. So, to her back then, for her son back then, where I was about 6-7 years old, for me to watch a show like that would not be the right thing to do. It'd be too graphic, too nightmarish, too gory, you get the idea. So that, again, due to that as well, was why I probably never really could remember what Inhumanoids was until I saw the bits and pieces here and there, and finally saw James Wolfe's review on it, that I finally remembered, oh yeah, it kind of just hit me, like, oh yeah, I remember that, but vaguely, very vaguely do I remember it. So, but that's just my thoughts on the Inhumanoids, one of the lost cartoons of the 80s, and basically my response to James Wolfe's Inhumanoids review. So, you want to comment down below, let me know, tell me what your thoughts are. Are some of you in the same predicament as I was? Let me know, and I'll talk to you later.